We are both excited to hop into TWOK today, The Way of Kings, by the beloved, the famous, the infamous Brandon Sanderson.
Brandon Sandolanch.
Brando Sando. And so we listened to all of you in the comments that we should break this behemoth into a couple of parts. And it made a lot of sense because there's a lot that happens quick. And these pages are long.
Man, I was comparing that to, I'm also reading Fury of the Gods. And I was comparing just the margins and word. And I'm like, that's a 500-page book. And that makes this look like a 2,000-page book.
Correct. That's a great point. You know, if you counted the number of words in this book, it must be out of control how large it is.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to look that up. I'm going to fact check that.
I'm going to guess over 100,000 words.
Yeah. I mean,
and I don't know how much is in a normal book, but this is out of control. But we broke this up into 3 parts. How many? 383,389 words. That's nuts. It's nuts. It's a huge book.
That's crazy.
So I put a poll in our YouTube, and everybody responded, or we had some folks respond to it, and the popular opinion was 3. I'd said, hey, should we do the whole book 2 parts or 3 parts? And everybody wanted 3. And so the way that we're doing this first podcast is going to be from the beginning of the book to the end of part 2. So we got through the interludes, we got through part 1, and then we got through, I believe there's some more interludes.
There's an interlude.
And then part 2.
We didn't read the interlude before part 2.
Before part 3.
Part 3, yes.
So we ended on...
I think we only read 1 interlude,
correct,
technically.
Yeah, and we ended literally right before the second round of interludes. Oh, Ryson is in it. RYSN. That's interesting. I'm just noticed. You know how the interludes say who...
I saw the 3 names.
Because he's been in the epigraphs, which I was going to ask you about later, and that's not a great starting point for this podcast, so I won't start there. But the point of today's pod is really just to have good, clean fun.
I love it.
As two warm-blooded Americans.
Couple of kings.
We're 2 kings just trying to talk plot today.
Oh, God.
And we couldn't be more thrilled to have gotten back into Brandon Sanderson. And
I was really shooting myself short by, we read Mistborn. I wanted to read other authors, and the whole time I'm like, take me back to Sanderson. Like all the things that I want in a book, I'm not getting, and I just got to get into Way of Kings.
Yeah. And so far it's a lot of acclimating you to this world, but I mean it's that classic Brando that we love.
Man, I'll say all the reviews that I read or heard said, man, the first 800 pages are a drag, and so I went into this with the expectation that it's going to be hard for me to read. I'm going to be bored, and I'm loving every word. I don't feel like it. I mean, it's a little slow, but not like it's a drag. I don't feel that at all. I don't feel that at all.
Because everybody told me epic, hey, your first epic fantasy, you gotta work up to it. And that's what we've been working up towards. But in fact, maybe that's why we are acclimated into his writing style, and we've read enough of faster fantasies that we could finally start an epic fantasy and have our expectations balanced. But
my toes are wet.
Yes, I will say so. We got our toes wet enough that we were ready for this. But to your point, I was expecting way more drudgery. And I'm so thankful he didn't do that, man.
I feel guilty that I thought that I bought into that, and I was. Yeah,
I'm glad.
I felt a little guilty about that now that I've read it.
You know what? I'm glad that you changed your opinion, because I fully expected you to follow the prevailing narrative that it was a slog, and I was prepared to say nuh-uh.
No, I don't feel that way at all.
So that's what we're gonna do today. We're gonna review the first 2 parts and the interludes that were towards the beginning. We're going to talk about characters we liked, some predictions. I do have a couple. I have 2. And I didn't want to get too crazy because, not a ton has happened yet, but I have 2 that I think are good.
Sure.
And then the last thing I'm going to do is Sanderson did make annotations for The Way of Kings, but he stopped after like chapter 11 or 12.
Okay.
Which personally I'm so bummed by, but then also thankful about, because we
talked about this.
Yeah, it doesn't spoil, but it tips you off enough that you can, if you're really savvy, you can use it to predict plot, and that would be unfair.
And for the sake of having a podcast, I feel like that's cheating. But you know what? To the viewers, I don't read them, So at least you've got one.
I just love that there's more Sanderson out there.
Yeah.
And how funny is that he reread all of The Way of Kings because he had taken a break for a little bit to write The Wheel of Time when Robert Jordan when Robert Jordan died.
Yeah, I got it around here somewhere.
You don't have it? So he wrapped up that series. Now I know, you got it right there. I don't know much about The Wheel of Time. I know it's a huge series, right? Tons of books in it, and it's known as one of the hallmarks of epic fantasy. It's been around for a while. It's a part of.
I really want to read it.
Yeah, and he chose Brandon Sanderson to finish it. So I don't know a lot about what happened to Robert, but if he passed or if he was not doing well, and so felt like he needed to hand the keys, but.
I might watch the show before I get to the book because I got 30 million pages of the Stormlight Archive to read.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested in watching the show.
That's a good point. That's a huge undertaking. But anyways, I just thought it was so funny. After he finished The Wheel of Time, he reread The Way of Kings to continue on with the Stormlight Archive. So not only does he have time to write all these books, he rereads them.
That's
and
crazy.
Then he writes annotations chapter by chapter explaining why he wrote what he wrote. That guy is. You remember in Harry Potter where Hermione's able to turn back the clock?
Yeah.
He has one of those.
Yes.
Because I don't know how he's doing it. But anyways, man, let's go ahead and get this started. I'm curious do you have a favorite character so far?
That's a good question. I'm going to have to talk out loud a little bit to narrow it down. I actually really like who is the girl that we've barely met?
Shallan.
I really like Shallan.
Me too.
I really like Shallan. In the brief times that I've met her, outside of Shallan, I actually really like Syl.
Yeah, the Spren. How great is Syl?
I really like Syl. And then I also... I'm excited. I would say the person I'm most excited to see play out is Sadeas. I'm most excited to see Sadeas play out because they're painting him in this picture as the bad guy. But I have a feeling that he's going to be good. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to see that arc play out. But I'd say Shallan is probably my favorite character I've met so far.
Yeah. And that is one of my gripes is you get no Shallan after part 1, and part 2 was very long, right?
Extremely long.
And there's there's virtually no allusion at all to Shallan, except in the last chapter of part 2, when Jasnah effectively calls Dalinar through this sort of medium, basically.
Yeah, it's kind of like a telegram, but I call it a telegram, but it's self-writing.
Yeah, that was odd. Whatever she's writing is getting transposed through time and space.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That is an interesting little bit of tech, but
it's kind of like a 3D printer.
Yeah, I guess
it operates just like a 3D printer.
And somebody using the internet to tell it what to print. But Shallan's just drawing. She's drawing what what they're seeing.
The Voidbringers.
The Voidbringers. Yeah. So that is we could definitely talk about that chapter, but yeah, Shallan was just so good, man. And in the annotation, Sanderson talks about this. Apparently, a lot of the early readers, when they're trialing the book, felt like he dragged on a bit with Shallan, and then also felt like, of course, Jasnah was going to give her the position of being her ward. Yeah. And so it was why are you making her continue to
this cat and mouse
find
game,
ways to challenge Jasnah? It's obviously she's going to get awarded it, but I completely disagree.
I liked the persistence and her conversation with the sailors outside.
Yeah.
And,
that was fantastic.
Yeah, and that's a little anecdote that he gave her, and she was like, "Yeah, you're right. What am I?"
And you're actually referring to a character called Yalb, I believe.
Yalb, yes.
And believe it or not, Sanderson says in his anecdotes he liked Yalb so much he might get a spinoff in the Cosmere.
Oh, nice. That would fire me up. I like him.
That's a good
it's
character.
It's such a great scene when Shallan comes out. She's all defeated, and Yelb's talking, and he's like, "I stole the money from those guards outside."
Yeah. just a con artist.
Yeah, just a great scene.
Just a good-natured, conniving.
God,
con
he reminds
artist.
me of Locke Lamora. He's got the Locke Lamora.
That's actually why I use the word connivery, is because that's in my review of Locke Lamora. I say that because he's exactly like Locke Lamora, kind of unpolished. I bet Yalb is
kind of like a Chains. Like a father figure a little bit, but just like in the background.
But that what a good character. I would completely agree with you on Shallan. I very much appreciated that character and that whole section. I just, these parts are so long and he breaks them up by character that I'm just afraid of how much time goes by without knowing what's going on. And I was constantly curious about her. So that was my only critique.
Yeah. And remind me, Shallan is tied. Her brothers are, their kingdom's about to fall. They're indebted, and she's got to steal one of the soul. She's got to steal Jasna's soul caster. Essentially, that's the ploy. But isn't she somewhat tied to Kaladin?
I don't.
No,
so.
Not Kaladin. Maybe it's just Jasna's brother. Jasna is Dalinar's sister.
Jasna is his no. Jasna is the daughter of Navani.
Yeah, his niece. Dalinar's niece.
It's niece, and then Alethkar's sister.
Yes.
So Shallan has no relation, but she does have siblings. Ballot is one of them.
Yeah.
And there is a chapter on it where you do get Ballot's perspective briefly, and he's just kind of an odd duck.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe I'm drawing ties to maybe their house might be referenced throughout the material, but I feel like there has been a nugget or two that has tied Shallan into the broader picture.
I should read
maybe
my
only
notes.
Her last name and tied to the kingdom or something, but I could be grasping.
Well, I will say this: supposedly her dad's dead.
Yeah.
However, I think that there is he
was down bad with the loan sharks.
He had gotten he was up to something. He was obviously trying to make a name for his family, and I think he was considered like a bright lord, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he was light eyes, but I don't think he was super high up on that, in that echelon. But he supposedly died, but I also felt like they kind of left it open somewhat that maybe also not.
Maybe, he faked his death. Have you seen
or that he could just be doing something else?
Have you seen
now.
Uncut Gems?
I haven't.
Okay, so I also haven't seen Uncut Gems, but I know enough about it where essentially Adam Sandler just keeps hedging his bet, and I imagine until it's just so chaotic, where I imagine that Shallan's dad is something similar, where he's making a deal that's on the heels of another deal, and if it's all a house of cards, and if it all falls down, that's probably why he skipped town or is dead.
Yeah, definitely. So who knows? I mean, he could come back up potentially.
Yeah.
And I've got actually only one thing I'll say about him. But yeah, in terms of characters that I liked Shallan. Of course I like Kaladin.
Yeah.
But, I'm a sucker for anybody.
Who doesn't like Kaladin?
I think it's hard not to. And, one of the things that I think Sanderson has gotten public praise for was his ability to sort of capture a character with depression without letting the character just fester in that depression.
Yeah, right.
And Sanderson talks about
without
this.
feeling forced a little bit.
Well, also, someone that's depressed, the problem about writing someone truly depressed is that they do nothing, actually. Like, there is no action because they're immobilized. And so it could be really challenging unless when you're writing a book like this, to have a character with depression still completes something. And so I thought he did a nice job where, Kaladin sort of, you know that he's downtrodden, and in fact, there's a chapter where he was going to jump.
Yeah, he's about to jump.
He was about to jump, and Syl came and sort of saved him from that situation. So, and there's a couple of moments where you get his psyche is sort of in a really rough space, especially when he was imprisoned in that sort of trailer. Yeah, and he's really worse for wear. But otherwise, you don't get a ton of glimpses into him being, depressed per se.
No, I mean, I'd say the main glimpses that you get to paint the picture of Kaladin is really the flashbacks with his dad and grappling with the trials and tribulations of being the weight of being a surgeon, and it's a thankless job, especially in this time where that's the foundation of who he is. He wants to be a warrior, but his upbringing was having a thankless job, saving people, and if you do it great, it's like, hey, thanks for saving them. If you don't, it's like, dude, you killed my daughter.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So he definitely had a trying childhood where he was being forced to meet the expectations of his father, who was a prominent surgeon in the town that he grew up in. And then obviously Kaladin goes against his father's wishes, which we haven't gotten to that point yet in the novel, because basically it kind of got left off on a cliffhanger where the Bright Lord overseeing that city died, and then the townspeople effectively blame Kaladin's dad.
Well, because Kaladin's dad tried to save his life and couldn't.
Yeah, and couldn't. And there's also a chapter where Kaladin tries to save a young lady's life, and she dies in his arms. So he kind of did go through some traumatic stuff, but also battling that internal identity of, wanting to choose the right path. And that's another interesting thing about this book is their religion requires that you find a path. Do you remember that chapter with Adolin, I think it is, where the priest is basically...
It's kind of like The Giver a little bit, where you're, born into a role, and
bingo.
That's your
And
life.
you have to choose. And I think that is an interesting thing about Kaladin's brother, isn't it? It starts with a R. What's his brother's name?
Oh, yeah. Speak of lame. He's kind of lame. He might actually be... slightly
he doesn't get a lot of face time, but Kaladin's brother I think is also somebody who's really directionless. Relinar or something.
No, that's
it starts with an R. It's not a huge
no, you're
deal.
Thinking of Dalinar's other son,
which is Aladin's brother.
Adolin's, and I think that's Ralinar.
Yeah, is it Ralinar? Is
Something
that his
like
name?
that, yeah.
But he's directionless, and so I am interested to see
directionless.
If he can...
Maybe he loves rocks. He's just a rock guy. Like he's a geologist. He loves picking up rocks.
Are you talking about TN? That's
Kaladin's
brother.
That's who I thought we were talking about.
No. I'm talking about if you're talking about choosing
because we were talking
paths.
about okay.
And how Aladin obviously is clearly on the path of being a warrior. He's going to fill in for his dad. And then Aladin's brother.
Yeah, he is truly directionless.
He tried to get on the battlefield and got shamed. He's like, get the f*** out of here. And he's just like caught with his pants down kind of and has to just exit the scene.
Yeah.
But but he seems smart. And you know who I like character-wise is the wit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I like that squirrely, silly jokester.
I just like that's a profession. Is to just talk shit.
Yeah. Well, he is kind of and they
laugh.
just sort of tolerate him, right? But Aladin's brother is able to go toe to toe with the wit, so you know that there's something there. And even the wit says, like, okay, you could do my job.
Yeah. Right.
And so he has something, and I believe he even challenges Dalinar at one point. Not so much challenges, but Dalinar basically says if he conquers another shard bearer, that he's going to give it to him. So I am expecting something from him.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's going to be,
but enough for Dalinar to see like there's promise here,
or there's guilt, deep guilt that he hasn't invested more in his youngest son.
On that note, something that comes up fairly frequently and we have no context into is Dalinar's wife, who he can remember her face but knows nothing about her.
Yeah, and
it's straight up amnesia.
And it happened, yes, that's a great point. It happened 10 years ago. Did it stick in your head, the number 10, at all when you were reading this?
No.
For me, it was everywhere. I documented a couple of them. But there's 10 high princes. They refer to the 10 deaths. In the most recent chapter, it refers to the 10 fools. This all happened 10 years ago.
Interesting.
It's just I don't know. That was just I'm afraid to look anything up online for fear that it spoils it. So I'm Googling nothing.
Yeah,
but
good.
I was just curious if I've noted this repeated 10.
Well, I mean, we do know from reading Mistborn that 13 was
significant.
Very significant. I mean, that was like the basis of everything.
Let's just put a
pin in
earmark on that because maybe there's something. So for the future, as you continue reading, so see if we see more 10s.
Yeah, I'll make a mental note of that.
Another character I liked was Szeth with an S. Szeth.
Oh, is he in the lake, the big lake?
No, he's the guy at the very beginning that started the war.
Oh yeah.
He killed Gavilar.
And I think we get more of him in this interlude.
We'll get more in the second interlude, but he killed Gavilar, and then there's a chapter on him where you learn more about him. And
that's coming back to me now.
He is a very interesting character. Do you remember the chapter where it talks about he basically becomes a slave to whoever takes he's got some sort of relic that he carries on him. See if I can find that.
Yeah, it's like a necklace or something. And then pretty much the only rule is like I can't kill myself.
Correct. That's exactly right. I wanted to see if I could find that because I thought I took some notes. I can't remember what chapter that was. I think it was early on.
That would have been pretty early on.
I'll probably also edit out any silence, so we don't have to worry about silence with these.
I did take one note in my phone.
It was a sick situation. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, yeah.
Can I see your book?
Yes.
I'll keep your page.
Okay, thank you. So listen to this. That's an interesting... So there is a second interlude, second section of interludes that take place, by the way. Or maybe this is the first section, but it's Interlude 3, The Glory of Ignorance. That's the chapter I'm referring to, I believe. But anyways, so he becomes a slave to those robbers who robbed him of that stone that he had or that gem that he had.
Yeah.
And so somebody ordered him to kill Gavilar.
Yeah.
So now my question is, he didn't do it on his own fruition. Also, he's not Parshendi. So he dressed up in all white, faking as a Parshendi. He is from the west side. He's of a different clan. He's not a Parshendi. And so for him to have done that, he was masquerading as one to create that war.
Yeah.
So someone out there did that, and I was curious.
Powers that be.
I wanted to bring that up to you. Is who would have the motive for framing the Parshendi?
Well, I think there's obviously this map is so big. I mean, there's a whole map in here that I haven't heard anything about.
Well, I was thinking, could it be someone inside of his circle? Could it be a Sadius? I know that...
Yeah, could be. I mean, I thought there were the Parshmen and then the Parshendi. And the Parshmen are the, slaves. And then the Parshendi are
I think it depends on who you ask, though. It's different areas view them differently. I will say this. They all treat the Parshendi as if they are other, as if they have no technology, no capability, no skill, no strategy.
Well, I think
they drastically underestimate them.
Yes.
And their skills.
Well, that and the Parshmen, those are the true slaves. The Parshendi, I don't think they know much about.
Yeah, that was a point of, I've written that down in here. I think that was a point of wanting to learn a little bit more about the difference between them. My understanding is that...
I just looked this up. The Parshendi are a group of people on Roshar who are more intelligent than the Parshmen.
But they're the same, the same people, more or less.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of how I read it too. And it depends on who you ask. I mean, there's some people that kind of look at them as the bottom of the barrel, next to animals. In fact, I have quotes in here where people refer to them that way, including, I think, Kaladin at times. They are drastically underestimated. And so, and then also, remember at the very end, there's a Parshendi that's a shard bearer.
Yeah, that you find out that they have shard that they have shard
and there was someone off in the distance that was looking at Dalinar.
Yes.
I'm wondering, somebody orchestrated that whole situation. I don't know that it would be someone from the Parshendi, because I don't think the Parshendi were necessarily interested in battle. But somebody created this rift to do the opposite of uniting. So something is telling Dalinar, some vision is telling Dalinar that, he needs to unite these people. And he's been reading the codes, and he's reading the Way of Kings and whatnot. And the opposite happened when Szeth killed Gavilar. And was it was effectively someone framed him to do that.
Well,
and he had to obey.
And because Gavilar was trying to unite everybody, same as Dalinar.
And they stopped it.
So then they really put the kibosh there.
So
that could be an inside job. Now the Parshendi is very interesting on the Shattered Plains, where they are accomplished warriors, and they the Alethkanians, whatever.
Alethkarans?
Yeah, whatever the human race is, normal humans, are assumed that they don't have any strategy, but the Parshendi seem to be accomplished warriors, and they just go up, they hit the front lines, and then they retreat. It seems like they are smarter than they are, and so there's got to be some sort of, that is their strategy.
And they're more capable, right? Because, remember the chasm duty chapter where Bridge 4 and the Bridgemen have to go down and they have to line up the bodies to get washed into the chasms from the storms and basically reclaim whatever they can find down there that are on them. And they found some Parshendi, and they had armor growing out of their bodies. Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
Almost as if they're soul casting themselves, armor and things. That's a different application of this technology, if that's what they're doing. Or somehow they've evolved.
Well, and I think when Jasna, or not Jasna...
Bingo. Yes,
the
Jasna.
wife. Oh, yes, Jasna. But also, Dalinar meets with Gavilar's wife, whatever her name is.
Navani?
Yeah, Navani.
Let me make
and
sure
she tells Dalinar that the Parshendi are able to make like half shards.
Yeah. Or no, that was the Vendon.
Yeah.
She said. But so there are also half shards out there. So things are changing. The status quo is being completely upturned. There's an upheaval happening with the status quo. And it seems like Alethkar and the kingdoms of Alethkar are really underestimating the rest of what society has to offer, especially even in terms of like how many shard bearers there are in the greater of Roshar, and just how they've been using Stormlight even, and these and their plates and their swords, because there's a whole chapter where Dalinar goes and is like, why aren't everyday laborers using this to and he's like, why was this only used, why did we only make the heralds only make these many swords, and like, why, if they had this technology, wouldn't they use this to better the
infrastructure,
to better the world and people at large, and they kept it.
That might be one of my favorite scenes in the book so far, is when Dalinar is trying to decide if he's going to give Adolin his prince seat, and he's just digging a trough for people to use the bathroom in. And I love that scene.
That's
so
a good
much.
scene, and it was like he was going to make the decision once he finished the latrine.
And then Navani shows up and is like, "Hey, I got to talk to you."
That was really interesting.
Now, I don't want to throw you off here, and so. I certainly want to talk about Dalinar's vision, where he gets dropped into Alethkar before it's Alethkar, and the heralds come down, and you find out that Alethkar was Alethkani previously, and the Shattered Plains was like the heart of where it was. And I think we talked about this, where everyone's like, where are the Parshendi like living at? And so I am anticipating that there is a full world in the Shattered Plains where the Parshendi are living.
You and I are so synced, because that is exactly what I wanted to talk about. I have a great thought on this. And if you don't mind, I'm actually going to look really quickly at a few passages, because I want to talk about the significance of maps.
Oh, yes.
Let's talk about the favorite topic ever. So, on page 424, can I read this quote?
Yeah.
because you're talking about a world within a world, right? And Jasna,
Or a world under a world.
or something. There's more to this, right? And Jasna has a breakthrough effectively, which is why she calls Dalinar, and she's talking about the Parshendi. And she asked Dalinar, and this is about the Parshendi, what were the first things they spoke to you about? Actually, yeah, she said, when did you first see a Parshendi shardbearer? So she's asking about that. And then she says, what were the first things they spoke to you about? The very first questions they asked, can you remember? Dalinar closed his eyes, remembering days with the Parshendi camped just across the river from them. Gavilar had become fascinated by them. They wanted to see our maps. Did they mention the Voidbringers? Voidbringers, not that I recall. Why? I'd rather not say right now. However, I want to show you something. So they were interested in the maps. Like maybe they know this. Like, are they onto us? Type of thing is how I took that. And then Shallan's father. It's alluded on page 130 that he had a strange collection of maps, and that he had basically drove himself crazy trying to find maps. Do you remember that? And now he's gone.
Shallan's dad?
Shallan's dad.
Yeah.
So it says here, there was that, and then it says here, were there old allies her father hadn't alienated? There was that matter of the strange collection of maps they'd found in his study. What did they mean? He'd rarely spoken of his plans to his children. Even her father's advisors knew very little. Renarin, her oldest brother, had known more, but he vanished over a year ago, and her father had proclaimed him dead. So I think that's what I was referring to. Her brother is gone, Renarin. But anyways, they mentioned the maps there, and then they mentioned the maps again.
Well, that, and, there's a full chapter called the map room or whatever.
Yes. And in the map room is this chapter. He says, not for the first time, this is Dalinar speaking, not for the first time, he felt as if he should be able to make out a pattern in the plateaus. Mm-hmm. If he could see more of them, perhaps, what would it mean if there was order to the chasms? So there's something about the shattered plains in these chasms that are important, right? And he was looking at this room full of maps, and he felt like I need to see more of this world. There's something I'm missing. So there's been a couple of breadcrumbs around maps in general. And to your point, I think that it has something to do with the Parshendi potentially. And maybe I'm curious if you had any other thoughts around the significance of those maps.
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me that I picked up on was when Dalinar is when he's in his vision, he's asking, what year is it and where am I? And they're in Alethkar, which is currently where he is, but whatever, thousands of years beforehand. And the Shattered Plains are literally are on top of where he is.
And he was shocked by that.
Where all the heralds come down and the Voidbringers are there, or the midnight something.
The Midnight Essence.
Yeah, the Midnight Essence.
Do you want to know something nuts about the Midnight Essence?
Of course I do.
This is crazy. So this isn't spoiling anything in Tress of Emerald Sea, but there's Midnight Essence in the Tress of Emerald Sea on that world.
Okay.
And so you didn't need to know this to understand what was going on. So basically in this vision, but effectively this is his real life. People are interacting with Dalinar as if he's another person, calling him a different name. So it's almost like he is having a living conscious experience in someone else's body. It's his own body, but somebody is viewing him in a different, it's almost like an alternate timeline that he's experiencing as himself. But he sees these sort of amorphous, giant blobs are like these vicious, dogs with teeth, no eyes. Mm-hmm. It's called Midnight Essence, and in Tress of Emerald Sea, it's a world that's based on spores, and there's a certain spore. In fact, the whole sea is spores, basically, and different seas that you sail have different spores and react differently, largely to water. And Midnight Essence is an extremely dangerous spore that basically you use your own, you give it water in your own water to basically turn it into any figure that you could. So you can almost possess it. So you can possess the Midnight Essence and turn it into anything that you want. And basically it continues to use your body's water as energy. So it's willing to let you gain hold over it so long as you give it water. You can kill yourself actually doing it should you stay in the body of the spore for too long. But in Tress of Emerald Sea, she becomes a rat, and she's running around, and she's using that as a way to spy. And so somebody was controlling that midnight essence.
Now, did I recall reading that the Parshendi are able to change form during
Battle?
high storms?
Oh, they can? I don't remember that, if I'm being honest. I just know that the Parshendi have like supernatural jumping abilities.
Yeah.
Which does that reminded me of?
I don't know.
But that would be interesting. So
because that would be around the same.
Well, dude,
same
now
concept.
the Cosmere is coming into play. It's happening, and that might not be the only thing that's happening. And I've kind of picked up on maybe one or two other potential things, but not significant enough for me to share.
Yeah.
But I thought that was significant about the Midnight Essence.
Now they talk about in the prologue.
Yeah.
When you're
like the prelude.
Yeah, the prelude when there's the heralds.
Yeah, yeah.
And they talk about how they die and pretty much get reborn. Is it the desolation?
They refer to the desolation, yeah.
And they also talked about in his vision, Dalinar, the desolation was coming.
It was coming.
And
yes.
so Dalinar is almost like seeing that firsthand.
Yes.
And so
he's trying to prevent another one potentially or something.
Yeah, in the visions.
Yeah.
I don't know. And
yeah.
Do we think that because they're at the beginning they're missing a herald? Like the one guy never is missing.
Point.
So do we think that in Dalinar's visions he is like this reborn missing herald? And is going to come back at the next desolation
that
or
would
something.
be interesting. Well, I wasn't thinking Dalinar, but I was actually thinking Kaladin.
Yeah. The only reason I said Dalinar is because that's the only time I've seen Desolation connected to another character. But yeah, I mean, certainly that would be...
Here's kind of why I say this. Do you remember, because I like where you're going with this. This is kind of a wacky concept, which probably won't come to fruition, but I love, let's explore this train of thought. Let's pretend that maybe you could have the Herald reincarnate somehow. But something's happening with, I'll share a few things that I think are happening with Cal, but one of the things is there's a lot of comments where it's like, Cal is finding strengths to pull off these nearly impossible feats of endurance. There's several times when he's training with the log, and again in one of the runs during the Bloody Sunset, where, quote, he pushed himself too hard in the morning training, then again standing instead of resting between bridges. What possessed him to do such a thing? He could barely walk. There's a bunch of comments about how he keeps getting paid spears that are losing their Stormlight. Like, remember that? Like,
oh, yeah.
He goes and he was trying to barter, and they're asking, is this a dud Stormlight? Gaz says it.
Gaz is
the other guy.
Dude, those were fresh.
Yeah, these were fresh, and it happens multiple times. So I'm wondering, is he pulling Stormlight? And is that why the spheres are inexplicably drained and he's finding these powers of strength?
Yeah, that checks out.
That checks out. And if so, how?
To your point about Kaladin being the Herald, I'm holding out because that seems too obvious.
Well, listen to this. Remember the scene where the heralds coming down from the skies? They might be lashing because Dalinar explains them falling.
It's like a meteor.
They're
almost.
probably lashing, right? Which was that magic system they taught us about at the very beginning.
Flip the world upside down, and
where they're able to like pull themselves towards things.
It's kind of like Inception, where they flip the world around. And
I'll be honest, that was losing me a little bit. I was really struggling to.
Well, especially that's like the first chapter, and you're like, damn, Sanderson.
That was another qualm I had with this book, was he taught us a whole magic system in like one chapter, and then never talked about it.
And then has
again.
not talked about it again.
But I've been thinking a lot about it, trying to remember it, because I think maybe the heralds were. But do you remember Dalinar mentions like it looked like they were leaking Stormlight out of their helm, of their mask. So that means that they can internalize Stormlight, and that's part of lashing, right? Is remember when Szeth would pull it from the lanterns and stuff. That's how he killed Gavilar and everyone. They can manifest Stormlight. So I do think he's like a herald of old, essentially. He is able to somehow possess the Stormlight.
Yeah, I'm tracking. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't want it to be Kaladin because it seems too obvious.
Does it seem too obvious? Because this is a pretty crack pipe train of thought.
Well, I mean,
that would be
Kaladin
nuts.
is the underdog. He's down and out. He doesn't get hit by arrows when he's doing the bridge run. Everyone's like, dude, how you're different? Like, that's weird. Maybe I just picked up on it similar to you, but
you're right about
I don't
that.
want it to be Kaladin because that seems too obvious. But if it is Kaladin, I'm not going to be mad.
Well, you're not the only one that has commented on his luck. In fact, there's a whole chapter where Rock, it's while they were trying to get the knobweed, which is that powerful antiseptic. So they had a ruse with Gaz to get out there and was pulling the weeds. And Rock basically says, like, it's not just luck, because he could see Syl, which was unusual. Like, that is not how this is supposed to happen. And Syl is slowly evolving, which is a whole other character arc.
I love that.
Whole other arc that we could talk about. But he says, there's a comment that was made in one of the chapters where it says, I think it was Teft or someone said, Aishi, herald of luck be praised. Herald of luck. Herald. So I'm wondering, do the heralds have some sort of
like defining attribute or something?
Yes. And then because Rock basically mentions not a single arrow touches your head. Arrows fall all around you. He was put in the most compromising of positions by, actually, that's how he gained Rock's loyalty, was by putting Rock in the back and him taking the front. And he should have died 100 times over with how many bridge runs he's had at the front of the crew.
Yeah.
And so there is something going on. But
well, and
I don't know if
that's
it's
interesting
that or
because I'd have to think back. The only other attribute that is spoken about is the thrill. When Dalinar is in battle and he's like, can you feel the thrill?
And Kaladin feels it too.
And so, maybe back to your point about 10, I can't remember, are there 10 heralds?
10 heralds, 5 women, heralds? 5 men.
And so, yeah, maybe there's a herald of thrill. Maybe there's a herald of luck.
I don't know. I'd be so interested, but I wish I paid a bit more attention, because I think it was like the Pure Laker or whatever, that guy, Ishik or something, or I forget what his name, but there's Ishik. There was an interlude where they talk about him as a Pure Laker. And I thought he mentioned a lot of religious stuff, but I haven't been paying too much attention. But when it said Herald of Luck, I was like, oh, that could mean something.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch out for that more.
Something else about Kaladin. So this is talked about in the interlude with Szeth. And he says he was referring to, it's called an Oath Stone. That's what the group of thugs had discovered, that basically he has loyalty, he has a fealty to them and a loyalty to them, that the only thing he can't do is kill himself, like you said. But there's a quote that says, what would these men say if they knew he was a shard bearer, a surge bringer, a wind runner like the radiance of old? His eyes turned from dark green to pale when he summoned his blade. So I wanted to mention that because there's a key term in there, wind runner. What is a odd yet defining characteristic about Kaladin that makes no sense?
He's obsessed with running.
Well, no. Well, yeah, I guess that's right. He's a bridge runner. But what's following him?
Syl.
And she's a
Windspren.
A Windspren.
Oh,
Spren follow the things. The Spren are... An anger Spren happens when you're angry. A rot Spren happens if you're...
Actually, this is what I was going to look up the other... I'll save your page.
So long story short, is he a Wind Runner?
Yeah, I
that was a big revelation that I had that I was hoping that you'd be more pumped about.
That's just like I breezed over the term Wind Runner, so I'm just hearing it for the first time.
Okay, I just remember I wrote that down because Szeth has amazing characteristics like the radiance of old.
Do you want to talk about something? Do you want to talk about something?
Well, are you handing it back?
No. I'm just letting you finish, and this is more comfortable for me.
No. I just that's all I was going to say is I think that's something else interesting about Kaladin is maybe that's why Syl is following him, right? Because Spren, the logic system behind the Spren is that they are called to action with whatever action it is that beckons them, right? So whether you're angry or sad. Or fearful, you could have fear.
Yeah. So what I took one note on my phone. There's a good description of Spren on page 118, and because they're kind of hard to visualize. I mean, he does a good job talking about the wind Spren and how they kind of float around a little bit, but she talks about the creation spren. She goes, they weren't substantial. If she moved her arm through one, its figure would smear like scattered sand, then reform. She never felt a thing when touching one. And so I just thought that was
a great
description.
Yeah, they're kind of this like entity, this energy. Actually, in Elantris, there's something called Seons, I think they're called, which are like these floating amorphous spheres, these blobs of energy that are sentient. The difference, which is another parallel, there's that those exist in Elantris, but in this system, the Spren are not supposed to be sentient. They are supposed to be, I don't know what they're supposed to be.
They're supposed to do like their own
people.
Thing, like just show up and then be gone and not talk to anybody.
With Syl is very unusual. In fact, there's a passage in here where Kaladin's realizing it at this point, where he's like, "You're not quite human-like at all. You're not human-like, but you are individual. You are intelligent. You're learning." And so I'm wondering,
she's like developing emotions, and it's
like
happening complex
because
logic
of Kaladin. So something about him, so I was trying to think about like Surgebringer, Windrunner, Radiance of Old. Like there was more to this magic system, and Kaladin seems to be almost kind of how like Ven, right, was a Mistborn without even knowing it, and she was able to like be an Allomancer and burn metals without even recognizing it. I kind of feel like maybe that's what's happening with Cal a little bit, and maybe he's imbuing some of this to her through Stormlight. I don't know what I'm just taking wild shots.
Well, two things, completely unrelated. I do want to talk about the differences between the Radiants and the Heralds, and I think there's another one which I need to figure that out. But the other one that I was more specific to this is, where does Syl go? She's gone. Where does she go?
There are times where she leaves. Well, I think that's the natural order of things, is for a Spren to appear.
But I don't think that Syl is following the natural order of Spren.
No, you're right. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
Because she's observing Cal, but she does show up, and with these new thought processes and whatnot, almost like she's observing others or is going elsewhere and learning more. So I'd be... in the other books, has there been any sort of inkling that there's a broader world that the Seoms go to or whatever, or
maybe, I don't know. I don't think so, but I will say there is another magic system in Yuumi and the Midnight Painter where, by stacking rocks in a certain way with a certain aesthetic, you see on the beach, you can,
like Cal's brother.
Yeah, kind of like Tien, where like he has this interest in rocks. It's a system where they can pull things called Hijo, which is a spirit, which can grant kind of like wishes. Like they can manifest things. They can make things for you.
Yeah.
And they come about because of the more ardently and creatively and like the more passion that you have when you're stacking these rocks, essentially, you can call this spirit.
Dude, I mean, that's when you think about Tien, that is if that is part of that book, to think that Tien is not somehow tied to that.
Well, he collects rocks at the very least and gives them.
But there's always talking about his rocks and how excited constantly. He is. And like you just said, the passion behind the rocks.
And rock's name has to do with stones. Like there's something about it, but I don't know. That is kind of a loose but
maybe
real
Sanderson's
connection.
just a diehard geologist.
But so maybe. But that was an interesting magic system in Yuumi, and that is a way that they can pull. That's the energy force there. It's called Heons, basically, or Heons. But these Hijo can come, and that's the only other like entity that I can think of that has. But whether or not they're transcending the Cosmere is tough to say. But we do know who is transcending the Cosmere, and I've talked about him.
I know
Hoid, and Hoid is a rascal. And
I know nothing about Hoid other than what you've told me.
You learn a lot about him from Tress, and frankly, and I've gone on record saying this. I think Tress of the Emerald Sea is so much better than Elantris, and way better than Yuumi and the Midnight Painter.
Sure.
There's Hoid and Yuumi as well. I can't remember if Hoid's in Elantris. I don't think so, but I'll make a prediction. I think Hoid might be the wit.
Who's wit?
Remember, the wit is the guy that basically.
Yeah, he's the shit talker.
He's the shit talker.
He's the jester, the sarcastic jester.
I'm wondering, where is Hoid? Someone's trying to find him.
Because they're looking for him. Because they show up to the lake.
But the personality and the wit is Hoid.
Oh, okay.
Like, that seems an awful lot like he's Joke's dude. That's his personality. So I was like, oh, dude, that's Hoid.
I love that.
So I'm just wondering.
Wise, sarcastic jester?
Yes, that's
that sounds
Hoid.
great.
That is Hoid's character. I'd be shocked if it wasn't him. I did want to ask one other, like, this was the only other thing I thought of. So my major thing was Kaladin potentially being a Windrunner.
Yeah.
One of the other questions that I had,
but we don't know anything about what a Windrunner is.
No.
Just the tie.
And you asked the question right before we dove into this about what's the difference between the Lost Radiance and the Heralds. There is a passage in here that I didn't have time to add to my notes where someone clarified that. It's still a little bit murky for me. But the Heralds, I think, preceded the Lost Radiance.
Yeah, because when we were talking about Dalinar's vision, it's actually the Radiance that come down.
Well,
and I think the Heralds are the one, because the whole like religion of the Alethkar, of the warrior code, is to take back like the heavens, right? Like when you die, you get to go and like fight with the heralds.
Yeah.
And so, but they were like, we're bringing the fight back to them.
So, but do you remember? There's a comment that's made that there's 10 heralds, 5 women and 5 men.
I might have missed that.
So that is the heralds were sent to teach mankind. They led us against the Voidbringers after we were cast from the heavens. The Radiants were the orders of knights they founded. Thank God. I found it randomly. But so that's a little bit on that. But
that's like all we know.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part. And because at the beginning of the book, those are the Radiants.
Well, I don't know. I think that those were the heralds. Well, those could have been the Radiants, but the ones who came down in Dalinar's vision, that was epochs ago. And I'm thinking, I know that there was a woman in that.
Yeah, there was.
That came down, because actually Dalinar even said, I didn't think that there were women.
Were women shard bearers, yeah.
Which means that must have been a herald.
A herald, yeah.
So I think he was talking to the OGs.
Yeah.
And also, they were confused with Dalinar's fighting style, too. Like, where did you learn this?
Oh, and then they say, you can come join us. So maybe that would be them inviting him to be a Radiant.
Dog. What if, in these flashbacks, he does create an imprint on the timeline where he somehow does actually become a herald?
Yeah.
And what if he's the herald of luck or something like that that's helping Kaladin?
Yeah.
That would be weird. But also, that'd be odd, because it's like the things he's doing in his visions actually are impacting the timeline of the future. Like, maybe he did this to himself, like pulling himself out of being a king in real time. I don't know. This is getting out of control.
That would be like true Interstellar, where he's
able to
he's lost in time space, and he's like telling himself like, no.
Or like the Marvel movies, where like they play with.
I will say that one of my favorite things about this book, which is, I don't know why, is that Dalinar and Kaladin are like in the same camp.
Yes.
Pretty much.
Well, and they're very similar character arcs, man. They're both. I actually made a comment of that, is they are going through extremely similar experiences, right? Both of them, like, there's multiple passages that talk about Kaladin trying to create unity with the Bridgemen, with Bridge 4, but then the camp at large, right? Like, and then there's, and obviously that's what Dalinar is being called to do from his visions. But more than that, Dalinar is struggling with identity. To be the king that, that fights and protects and that follows the Alethi way, or to follow the codes, to be this other version of himself that's trying to seek peace, that's trying to unite, that's trying to do things differently. And then the same thing with Kaladin, right? To go into war, or to stay and be a doctor, to do these other things. I mean, there were so many parallels between their characters.
Without a doubt.
I don't know if he did that intentionally, but it's overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Right? That is just something I wanted to mention.
In overwhelming similarities.
The only other thing I was going to mention was, do you remember there's a quote that happens, it says, that that always discomforted Szeth, as it reminded him of the strange black sphere Gavilar had given him. When he died, Gavilar died, he gave him a black sphere.
And then told him, like, tell my look for the words. What are his dying words? Look for the like, most important words that guide the kings or something.
Yes. It was like the most important words that have ever been said. It says here, tell my brother he must find the most important words a man can say. He must find the most important words a man can say. Which I was like, is it unite them? Like, what's going on? Right. But he gave him a black sphere. And Szeth, who is obviously incredibly capable. I forget what areas he's from. Maybe we can look at the map real quick, because this is important. I think where he came from.
Look it up on my phone.
Let's see if I can beat your technology, you little bitch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I will, because I think it's from Shinovar. Beat you. Ha.
Yeah.
So he's from Shinovar.
This page, spoiler.
Okay, we're on to something. Your boys are hot. But so he is from Shinovar. He's not Parshendi. So that's another reason he should have never killed. Dude, the fact that he was in that, someone had his oath stone and forced him into doing that. But he said he was just always discomforted Szeth, that something had reminded him. That the strange black sphere. What is that sphere? I was thinking, could that have been Midnight Essence? But that doesn't make sense, because Midnight Essence is a spore. I don't know that it'd be a sphere. It's not a stone. It's not like a soul stone, right? Or a gem.
Well, I mean, it could be a sphere.
Or a gem heart.
I mean, spheres have stormlight in them. Maybe it could be a sphere with
like some
Midnight
sort of
Essence or something in it.
It's also interesting that they use that as money. Like they have such little regard for Stormlight as for the godlike powers that can help you possess, that they treat it as money.
Yeah.
And I remember Szeth being so confounded by that as he's walking.
It would
through
be
the
like
halls,
if they started in Dragon Ball Z, they started using Dragon Balls for pennies.
I never watched Dragon Ball Z.
Okay, well,
so
there's.
I wish I could.
Dragon Balls would be like, getting a gold star in Mario. It's like there's only so many.
And they're just treating them like they're nothing.
Yeah.
But
that's what I imagine these spheres look like, as a Dragon Ball.
But that was kind of odd, right? That they gave him that. So another thing I wanted to ask you, why do Dalinar's episodes or visions only happen during high storms? And I like that they talk about the east as stormward. Like, storms always come from the east, which is where the Shattered Plains are, which is where the Parshendi are. Like, something is happening.
Brewing, yeah.
But, and obviously the Everstorm is coming, which they don't talk about too much. But there is this Everstorm, right, that I think that's what they're trying to prevent. Maybe that's the start of the desolation. I have no idea.
Yeah. I don't.
But it happens to him during high storms.
The high storms, they replenish Stormlight.
You're right.
They replenish Stormlight.
Wes, that's brilliant. So Stormlight might be somehow helping him transfer, right? Because he's transferring consciousness. And actually, that does happen in Yumi and the Midnight Painter. While they sleep, they're able to transfer consciousness into another body through this energy source. So there is the ability in real time.
It's kind of like Szeth a little bit with his metal mine or copper mines.
Well, this allows you to,
because when he was sleeping,
yourself.
he could and then stay awake.
So
he
could store energy and he could do those things. So it's like similar, but it's happening when they sleep. And I think, Dalinar's, it happens during high storms and he passes out and he's effectively asleep, right? Because he's having these episodes, sleeping.
He's like kind of seizing out a little bit, fishing out.
Yeah, he's losing it, dude. And I thought that was another interesting callback to that. I don't think it super relates to what happens in Yumi, but there's something happening during a high storm. I think you were onto something. I forgot that the spheres get replenished by Stormlight during a storm.
Well, that and
maybe Kaladin.
Man, they talk so much about the flora and fauna, if you will, in this book, about how they act, how they act pre and post storm,
and they move around.
Storms.
That's a great point.
And how they get recharged and whatnot. But I do, back to this map thing. Have you even looked at
the oldest map?
Yeah, with the Shadesmar. Have you even seen this map?
No, I haven't.
Dude.
I've only looked at the old Alethkar map.
So
the old Roshar
this is
map.
a map called Shadesmar, and also if this is the signs of the heralds, which they talk about on their shields, where this is 2 eyes, it forms 2 eyes here, and these are like the signs, heralds. And then but this Shadesmar, the Sea of Lost Light, Nexus of Transition, Sea of Regret, Sea of Souls, Expanse of
that's a whole
Densities.
New world. Maybe that's the map that everybody's trying to find.
Possibly, but I mean, there's no reference of anything about
Not
this.
yet. Only that there's
but to your point about the high storms, like that, I imagine that this is where a lot of this energy is probably coming from.
Well, funny that you should also mention this. So this is like the crest of the heralds, and did you notice it at the start of every chapter? It's on there.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
2 eyes. And then I think these people's faces are the heralds. And they're all different. And then what I noticed is this last chapter, Wes, and I would have not known what this was until you just showed it to me. I think it showed that. It changed.
Oh.
The map you just showed me had those in it.
Yeah, yes, it did.
So that's interesting. So that's the crest, or like the symbol of the Lost Radiance.
Yeah.
It represents the 2 eyes, and like the 2 eyes represent something, and then the 8 spheres represent something. And then obviously I think these are the heralds. And then that is the
I'll have to start paying attention to that, because
that map you show have these weird things?
Yeah, it did. I'm gonna have to start paying attention to that, because that's got to be, that's not in there for no reason.
No, and oh, you mean this map in the back?
No, the symbols at the beginning of a chapter, it's not there for no reason.
I've been focusing on those. I've been trying to wonder, well, of course I'm trying to figure out who the epigraphs are. I can't decide.
Can I say something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I've barely even read the epigraphs.
Oh, really? I think, Sanderson has gone on record saying he knows people don't read the epigraph.
But I got so much out of reading the epigraphs in Mistborn.
These are not as obvious.
They're not as, and so I was like, I'm just
Well,
excited.
they have been talking about this Ryse, R-Y-S-E.
Yeah, I've seen his name a few times, yeah.
And I think that they talked about the 17th shard in one of them, too. Did you see that? Well, you haven't been reading them. That is something that was that I took particular note of. Is in one
look at this. This is
another one.
New.
So they just transitioned to these.
Yeah, I'm gonna start.
The
watching
other ones
those.
didn't have that. I've been paying close attention. But anyways, one of these epigraphs refer to the 17th shard, and somebody is after him. So I don't know if he was a herald or if he was one of the Lost Radiants.
Yeah,
and I think we need to remember that the heralds led against the Voidbringers, and the Radiants were the orders of the Knights that the heralds founded after to protect, to serve and protect. Both abandoned the people, so it seems, in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And anyways, I don't know who this Ryse R-Y-S-E.
Yeah, because there's like some animosity between the Radiants and the Heralds. Like everyone's just lost. They've lost all faith in whatever the Foundation used to be.
Unite them.
Yeah.
What's going on there. And here it is. It starts off by saying, there's another one of these. I'm being chased. Your friends of the 17 shard, I suspect. I believe they're still lost, following a false trail I left for them. They'll be happier that way. I doubt they have any inkling what to do with me should they actually catch me. You know who's also being chased is Hoyd. I don't know. I'm taking big swings now.
Yeah.
So somebody is being chased. I doubt that this was in the codes or the Way of Kings, because it's referring, that the way that this is being said almost feels like another journal or like.
Well, I don't know if you've read the Arcanum in the back.
No.
I know you. I don't think.
Do you want
talked about this? Yeah. I mean, you can open it up where, he's got this. It's not a glossary. It reads as if it's a journal.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you read a passage and I'll just...
Yeah, I'm going to try to find one.
I doubt that those would be in the epigraph, but I can't believe.
Okay, so here we go. He's talking about reverse lashings, giving an object a gravitational pull. I believe this may actually be a specialized version of the basic lashing. This type of lashing required the least amount of stormlight of any of the 3 lashings. The Windrunner would infuse something, give a mental command, and create a pull. But the way he's writing this, as if this is yeah, I picked up on that. But he's he's writing this as if somebody else is teaching this to me, not Sanderson being like, "Hey, this is a definition." It seems like one of the books
that Jasna would find in the library.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you find Windrunner in there and see what it says? If there's
no, I mean this isn't like a glossary. He just uses the term Windrunner in here when talking. Oh, okay, windrunning and lashings.
Bingo.
Reports of the assassin in white's odd abilities have led me to some sources of information
this is Jasna.
That I believe are genuinely unknown. The Windrunners were an order of the Knights Radiant, and they made us 2 primary types of surge binding. The effects of these surge bindings were known colloquially among the members of the order as the 3 lashings. So they...
Dude, this is huge, Wes.
Yeah, so I think that this is Jasna's notes.
And she knows about the Windrunner. So, dude, I've got to read that because that might help us get ahead of what's kind of going on. And
yeah, when you read this, when you're introduced to lashings, you in the first page, you're reading this like it's a glossary. But it is not a glossary.
Wes,
this is truly a journal.
I had another thought. Do you know how Kaladin does not want to be a doctor? He has the thrill. Why does a doctor's son have the thrill? And then I'm also thinking, in other magic systems, including like Elantris, for example, you can't be an Elantrian unless you come from that blood. And you can't use the magic system. It's called Aeondor, or Aeons. Mm-hmm. It's like a system of symbols that you use. Almost like in Stranger Things, where they make those crazy symbols,
like a rune kind
of. Yes,
rune
it's like these runes, and then that allows you to do things. But you have to be of that lineage. To be an Alamancer, you have to be of royalty lineage. Mm-hmm. To be a Radiant, maybe you have to be of a certain lineage. Light Eyes, Dark Eyes, they have a cast here. Kaladin's supposed to be a Dark Eyes, but he sure as hell acts like maybe those aren't his real parents. Was he maybe... We're going to have some sort of revelation that he is something other than what he thought he was. Because he is so at odds with his youth and with...
And so different than Tien.
So different than his brother. So different than everybody in that town.
Yeah.
And yet he goes on to do amazing things. And then that is something that is a little fuzzy for me. He got in trouble and enslaved for abandoning his post supposedly, but he killed someone.
Well, so the first time you meet Kaladin is from the perspective of just some random guy where he gets put in Kaladin's company, and they're like, "Oh, this guy, he's the guy."
Yeah.
And then next time you meet him, he's a slave in a cart and branded traitor, thief or something.
The glyph word.
Yeah.
Word.
And he keeps, hasn't expanded on it. But he tried to kill a shard bearer.
Why would he do that?
So,
but
in that time,
I think he succeeded because it says he killed somebody.
No, he says I tried to kill a shard bearer because when he's talking with Teft and them in the chasms, they're talking about killing a shard bearer, and he's like, no, I've tried that already. And that's how we ended up where he is today. And if you recall, in that scene where you first meet Kaladin, there actually is a shard bearer in that scene, just like moseying around. And they're fighting just like a county battle across like county lines. And they're like, there would never be a shard bearer out here. But the first time you meet Kaladin, he's fighting in like a cornfield, and there is a shard bearer.
Can I not challenge you on this, but expand on it? So there's this adage in their religion that winning a shard blade was one of the main reasons common men went to war, because in Vorin kingdoms and in that religion, everyone had a chance to rise. And that if a man wins a shard blade on the battlefield, his eyes become light. He becomes a light eyes. And then Kaladin believed that as a kid. And then when he's talking to Rock and Teft, I think what he says is Teft was dying on that hill saying, no, if you become a shard bearer, if you kill a shard bearer, you become a light eyes. You become a shard bearer.
Yeah.
But then he made it seem like, no, that is not what happens. He's like, I actually wrote it down in here and I might be able to find it, but he's basically tries to contradict them by saying, no, they're pulling the wool over your eyes. And there's a beautiful quote in there that said something about how tradition is just another form of control, right? And they're just trying to, they create this lore to basically force indentured servitude into the war.
Yeah, so maybe he did.
And he's like, Sadius would, because, Rock was saying how that's why he ended up here from Shinovar. I think Rock is from the mountains. He's a horn eater or something.
Yeah.
And he got there because his master wanted to fight a shard bearer to get a shard blade to go back to his kingdom, tries and fails against Sadius. And then the whole thing was, and Kaladin basically says Sadius would have never given you his shard plate.
Yeah, so maybe that's what happens is that Kaladin beats them and they're like, no, dude, you don't get that.
You don't get this. And then to cover this up, you become a slave.
You're a slave. You're a traitor or whatever.
Is that why? Maybe that's why he has like these odd capabilities now out of nowhere with the Stormlight and stuff.
Could be. Yeah.
Maybe there is something.
Yeah, because we don't know. It's very fuzzy on what happened there.
Yes, they don't and you're right.
I'm not fuzzy. It's just
okay.
I
wanted
don't
to make
have
sure
the information there.
I do. I remember that. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it. But yeah, I put here. Yes, it says here. Maybe he could even do the unthinkable, win a shard blade and become a true light eyes. And then Kaladin no longer believes this. His argument with Teft and Rock while finding knobweed is on page 347. So on 347, that's kind of where he goes through and challenges. I don't know if it's worth bringing up, but I feel like I've committed.
Yeah.
And then that's pretty much what I had. But it says here, lucky he didn't win, Kaladin said, and discover how he'd been tricked. They wouldn't have let him walk away with Sadius's plate. Nonsense, Teft broke in. Tradition is the blind witness they use to condemn us, Teft, Kaladin said. It's the pretty box they use to wrap up their lies. It makes us serve them. Teft set his jaw. I've lived a lot longer than you, son. I know things. If a common man killed an enemy shard bearer, he'd become a light eyes. That's the way of it. He let the argument lapse. If Teft's illusions made him feel better about his place in this mess of war, then who was Kaladin to dissuade him? So Kaladin flipped majorly on, and that was an institutional part of their culture,
that is
foreign culture.
Canon.
And also, remember, Jasna is a heretic, so she bucks religion. She believes there's something else. So I think that's why she's kindred spirits with Dalinar, because Dalinar's having this revelation of sorts around the ways of old. And so I do think there's this Vorin system, religion rather, seems new. It seems oppressive. And it almost reminds me of, remember they were talking about the priests that had all ganged together?
Yeah.
And tried to, I forget what they were trying to basically control.
They tried
power.
To become in power.
Yes.
Like run the show.
And this was, and so that's a sneaky thing that had happened too. And I forget, they allude to this at times throughout the novel. And I think it's from the perspective of Shallan's, what do they call the minister type people?
I don't know. Well, there's another scene where Adolin goes to the priest to talk about his dad, and I think that might be
another
where
area.
You learn more about the priest trying to take over.
There is what are they called? Temptus Venden. I've got it in here, but there's I think it starts with a V. It's one of the few things I didn't write down, but there are these priests, and they talk about that. And one of them was desperately trying to get Jasna's attention.
Oh yeah. When Shallan's waiting for him,
and then he really loves her art and was very complimentary of her. And
I actually that's an interesting scene there, because when he comes in, assumedly like a important person,
yeah,
and Shallan like kind of bows to him or whatever, and he's like, don't worry about it. And she's like, oh, I need to talk to Jasna, and he's like, just tell Jasna that
I was here.
Like I was here, and that I told you to tell her I was here. Almost like that was gonna put Shallan in better graces with Jasna, that the guy like confided in her.
Interesting. That's an interesting point. I think we're going to learn a lot more in these interludes that we haven't read yet after part 2, but I don't know, man. I think that was pretty much everything that I wanted to mention for the most part. I don't think, I didn't have any major breakthroughs in terms of what's happening next. We know that Sadeas became the High Prince of Information, and this is a big deal because it enables him to get access to all the other High Princes when he wants. Mm-hmm. He can, interrogate any High Prince's army members, and does that to Dalinar because they're trying to find who slit the bridle or the saddle.
Yeah,
and Dalinar just stepped down. He just basically told Navani that he is done, and he's going to inform Adolin soon that he's stepping down and handing the kingdom to Adolin, who is very much pure Alethkar. Kill and pillage and take what's yours if you can. It's like that.
Take what you can.
It's like that Roman
back.
diatribe. It's just like conquer at will. Those who thrive, or what are the strongest, weakest?
The strong will prevail. Those that can't teach.
But that's kind of what I was thinking about with the end of that is like that's going to come across as him stepping down because he's complicit with that situation and maybe guilty, and he's also losing his mind. It's just a strange situation for him to step down, and you have to wonder what sort of character arc Aladin's going to go through, because it does seem like some of the questions that Dalinar asks him are thought-provoking enough for Adolin to be like, I haven't thought of that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So I wonder if Adolin's going to come over to Dalinar's side in the same way that Dalinar came over to Gavilar's side towards the end of Gavilar's life.
Yeah, I hope so.
So, any other closing thoughts on your end, buddy?
I don't think so. I'm so excited to get back in. I'm really pumped to learn more about Shallan and Jasna. I'm really excited for some of that. And she's going to steal her
soulcaster.
Yeah,
she's going to steal it.
I want to. The standard format of this podcast is to make predictions, but
it might be a little.
I don't think I want to.
Okay. Yeah. The only thing I thought of is maybe Kaladin is somehow he's using the Stormlight internally like a Radiant of old.
Yeah.
And so I don't know I don't know if he's a Windrunner or a Surge Binder or Bringer or what's going on there, but something very unique is happening with Kaladin, and there's a reason why Syl is following him. And Syl is going to. He's already saved his life once, so I'm excited to see what else happens with Bridge 4.
I really like Syl. But,
this was good. Well, hey, let's truck on.
Part 1 rating.
Oh, you know what? I thought about this. Does it seem unfair to give it a rating because it's such an incomplete body of work?
Sure.
I thought about this a lot because I've noticed that it really does seem to impact our overall book rating when we give piecemealed ratings. But if you want to give one, I will.
I don't feel a need.
Okay. I'll just say this. I'm enjoying it way more than I thought.
I'll echo that. I'm enjoying it far more than I thought. I've heard it was a drag. Everybody said it was a drag. If you feel it's a drag, I feel sorry for you. I don't feel that way.
No, I thought it was fantastic.
I'm really enjoying it.
And I refuse to let any of this like Wind and Truth stuff get in my head because apparently there's a lot of negative...
I don't know. I haven't heard any of it.
There's a lot of negative press about it, but dude, that's way down the line.
I'm off social media, so...
Yeah, good. Stay off because it made me so... I was so disgruntled by that. And it's just like, maybe he really did mess up with that one, but it's like, look, that does not need to impact the rest of the Stormlight Archive, which is
the first
historical.
Book is 400,000 words.
Yes.
Chill. Get through those ones first.
Yeah. Before we even
and then the next 2 million words to
Thank you.
Get
I need you to let me level set on that because I was like letting that bother me. And I'm like, dude, that book is like book 5 or 6. So, all right, we're going to read parts 2 and maybe 3. I forget what we're reading,
that's
but
what
we'll talk offline and we'll make
2
sure.
2 to 3 and then, or maybe like 2 through 4 and then we're going to leave 5. I don't know, something like that.
So we'll talk about that offline, but we segmented the book in 3 neat parts more or less. So, All right, Plot Goblins. This has been awesome. Love talking Sando with you.
Set a lunch.
Okay.
Come back next time.
Peace. Really hope that recorded. Was that a long one?
I didn't think it was long. My ears were just starting to hurt.